Galleries for having me here in Paris, and now the sun's come out. And I'm delighted to have such an expert panel to talk to this afternoon on fostering creation, the key role of collectors. I will say a few words just to introduce what we're discussing today before I introduce you to the panel, although also their full biographies are in your handout as well. But I wanted to say, I think the words collecting and collectors are perhaps slightly overused when sometimes we mean buying and buyers. I think for older art, when do buyers become collectors? Maybe when the buyer has a passion or an overarching plan for what he's doing beyond just buying. And hopefully that also feeds into contemporary art. The other big difference with contemporary art is that the artist is alive. You can be part of the process. You can support the artist in different ways, not just owning his or her work. There are a huge range of options that we'll discuss today, and I'd like to hear a little bit about what the ideal relationships could be between a living artist and would-be collectors. We have here, in no particular order, but Aldo Rubino, who is a collector but is also the founder of MACBA Contemporary Art Museum in Buenos Aires and has just come here straight off an aeroplane from New York. So thank you very much for being here. Aaron Cezar, who is the director of the Delfina Foundation in London, whose mission, it says, is to promote exchange and experimentation in contemporary art. And, you know, as we're at talking galleries, I also very much want to know about the role of the gallerists within this relationship. We're talking about, you know, how much could and should artist representatives guide their collectors towards other ways of supporting art. What are the boundaries that they need to respect and possible conflicts of interest. So it's wonderful to have here Samia Saouma from Max Hetzler Gallery. She heads up the gallery here in Paris, although the gallery is also in Germany. And Kamel Mennour, who has a gallery also here that I'm sure you know, and a small space in London too. So I think without just hearing me, I'd like to ask each of you in turn, maybe Aldo, if you can start. In your experience, how do you think that the best way an individual collector can support art in other ways than just buying? I mean, is it a case of introducing them to their network, giving money for production? What do you think is some of the best ways that a collector can help in general with young artists?
The artist can help, the collector can help the artist, you mean? Difficult. I think the collectors, the main wish they have is really to buy and build a collection over the years. When they start to collect and they start to know deeply an artist and they like the artist, in general, they engage with the artist. So some of them start to help to support a project from an artist. Many times even they work together with a gallery or work together with a museum for an exhibition. But I think that first, the collectors, the main wish they have is to collect, to know the artist, and with the time, and if the artist is alive, maybe they start to be engaged with the artist. That's a little bit.
No, yes, exactly. Your first relationship, I guess, with the artist is probably to buy.
Yes, for sure.
Work. That makes sense. Aaron, do you also have you got examples of how you've seen it work well?
I have. I think a lot depends on context in which the collectors and artists are operating in. In more undeveloped art scene, there's often a close relationship between kind of the artist and the collector. In very developed art scenes, because of museum patron groups, because of galleries to some extent. There's maybe a little bit more distance between the artist and the collector because the market begins to compartmentalize people into spaces. And sometimes those interactions don't kind of come together. In our own case at Delfina Foundation, we have been set up by what you would call a collector, though she refuses to take on that title. Like many collectors here probably also refused to kind of take on that title. It's been something that has evolved, you know, in terms of their engagement with the art world. They've maybe looked back and said, actually, yeah, now I actually do have a collection. But when I started, it started from this place of passion. But our own space was set up indeed by someone you would call a collector, and it's a residency space for artists. And increasingly, we started to work with different parts of the art world, and then we'll get into this later about how we're also offering residencies for collectors. But to go back to our core point, which was around artist residencies, our founder identified a need for more space for artists to work in London. And this is at a very critical time in the development of the young British art scene. This was the late 80s, early 90s. Now I think we can't look at the international art world, the art market, without thinking about some of those artists who came from that period, from the YBAs. And our space happened to be one of the spaces that helped nurture and cradle a lot of these artists. So I think going beyond the role of collecting and looking at the wider ecosystem, how you can support artists is very important. And Delfina is just one of many, many models that I hope that I can share with you later today.
And yes, no, please.
I would like to add something follow on your idea, maybe to make my point a little deeper, wider. It's true what you said. If you compare or make a parallel with the financial market, usually the collectors are closer to the artists when the artists are really starting artists, emerging artists. Like in the financial market, could be to put the seed capital for a new project. So it's quite the same. So, but when the project started to evolve, the companies became more public. There are many other collectors or many other shareholders. The personal relation or the closer relation start to disappear as part of the life. So I think that the art is going to start to be more on a star, and there are many fairs to attend, many exhibitions to attend. The relation becomes closer to the gallerist that represent the artist rather than to the collector, because it's part of the game, and the way it is.
And it is interesting to think about things other than, living in London is a very expensive prospect for a lot of it. So sort of in-kind patronage, it must be incredibly helpful. Samia, I know you want to share an example of something and we will go through the slides, where sometimes it's been a good idea to involve a collector in the production of a work, and why this particular collector and why this particular work. Is your microphone?
No, it's working. It's working.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Bon, j'espère que ça marche. So I wanted to talk about an example about...
I'm not sure that is working.
Okay. Yes. I would like to talk about an example of a collector who really helped, who had a key role for an artist, fostering his creation. It's a German collector whom we approached to help Jérémy Demester, who is our youngest artist. He's only 28. He had his first solo show in Paris a year ago, and before that he was in a group show in Berlin. Jérémy's work explores the nature of art and its relation with the founding myths of our world, with the different energies, alchemy, or coincidence. The work is infused with mysticism, esoteric sources, and occult literature. His paintings are always the result of collaboration, either with children, as was the case of the African paintings he did during a residency in Benin. Here is an example. He worked with children, dispersed the pigment on canvas together with them, gave them some instruction, but left them also free to react with it. And there's also the action in these paintings of nature, because they were left outside, and the rain was there, and the weather, and the heat, and etc. And the collaboration is also sometimes with craftsmen. So here we need the other picture of
but I'm just going to ask, with this was also funded, wasn't it? Private?
No,
Not this one.
This one, oh, sorry. I forget to say that this came out of residency in Africa, the Zinsu Foundation in Benin. He was invited to spend time there, and while there, he had the idea of a collaboration with children there. And this is a collaboration, obviously, with craftsmen, because it involves metal and bronze. And there was also a collaboration, there is, and there will be in the new work, collaboration with scientists and also with friends, which all form what he names La Demestria. Demester describes himself as a gypsy painter in reference to his descent. One could say that his work is a sort of cast of identity. Some of the paintings have a direct link with his childhood spent in a gypsy camp in south of France. The project for which we found a collector helping him is the Lightning Project. It emerged...
This one here.
Yes, it emerged from the desire to paint with lightnings, actually with painting, with its coincidence and energy. In order to do so, he needed to build a lightning rod device, there it is, implanted on a summit somewhere in the Alps mountains this year between June and August, where there will be lots of strikes normally. This device will capture lightning strikes during a storm and will then conduct the electric charges on the canvas you see there, thanks to the apparatus he designed. He was specially inspired by Walter de Maria lightning fields, the monumental setup on a plateau in New Mexico desert. And in Jeremy's case, lightning will compose the paintings. These will be on canvas, wood, or leather. The structure he will use has been designed with the collaboration of an architect and takes account of natural constraints such as wind, ensuring the project viability. In Berlin, he will be able to use the Terra Mobile system, a mobile laser that would serve as a tool to test the viability of the structure by triggering or guiding the lightning. Involved in the project are Jérôme Kasparian from the CNRS Research Center, who actually participated in the development of this tool, the Mirabile. And Terra Mobile is a project initiated jointly by a French-German collaboration of CNRS and DFG, which is the German equivalent. We plan to shoot a documentary on the project, and the painting will be exhibited in a solo show in one of our Berlin galleries next year.
And this, sorry to interrupt, Samia, but this you have found. So this presumably is not a cheap structure to make and
exactly.
to realize the artist's idea.
Yeah.
You have found a collector to fund it.
Yes.
And how did you identify?
And
why a collector rather than
exactly the artist wanted the funding, and we were ready to fund it, but we thought of this amazing collector who a month before at the Cologne Art Fair had bought one of his paintings without having ever heard of him and knowing anything of him. And this is a collector who is in the machinery business, and he started to collect in the early 80s, a while ago. He owns quite an extensive collection of around 600 works and never sold any. We contacted him as he had bought a painting by Jérémy Demester at the Cologne Art Fair without having ever known about him. And as he says, he's fascinating about things that could go wrong and by artists who dare to take risk. Following this path, he likes not to know what works he will be getting and to think that no one could guess in advance, including the artist.
So in this instance, you have very much two, the artist and the collector or the funder thinking in the same mindset. It's a bit like Aaron was saying about the context of this happens to fit well with a personal.
Absolutely, and we immediately thought of this collector because he liked to work and he's in this machinery business and he likes to take risk as the artist, obviously.
And actually, I'll move it also to Kamel. So also as a gallerist, I mean, how often do you suggest, what is the role of the dealer here? Do you suggest to collectors that they should enter in at this stage? Do they ask? Can I support?
First of all, I love this story.
It's wonderful.
And I think it's a fantastic commitment from this collector. And I like also the fact that it could fail. That's what he was saying.
Exactly.
I think it's extremely important. And most of the guys now are not like this collector that I would love to know, because Samia is incredible to have the trust of someone who would trust on the artist, who is a new artist,
very young.
Good artist, very young. I saw your
how
show.
old is he?
28.
Oh my
I saw your show, which was very good artist. So he trusted the project, not knowing very much what it could be, but he liked the idea to be part of the adventure. But he also, I would say, trust the gallery, because if they choose Jérémy de Mystère, it means that they really have a very good support on what he could do. As Samia said, she could have invest on this project, but she spoke like we are speaking all together, and the guy said, "Oh, I would be very happy to be part of that." I would give another story to compare our situation to a situation of before. I started in art 18 years ago. I did a Master of Economy, so not at all in the territory of art.
Aldo as well, you were in finance, weren't you?
Yeah,
Yes,
so,
there you go.
Nobody is perfect. And,
Me too.
so I heard the beautiful story of another collector who is a very important collector of the 70s. His name is Herman Daled. He was one of the most important serious collector, a Belgian collector. And he told me a beautiful story that I want to tell you today, to compare about how the kind of DNA of a collector today, because they are not like the one that Samia is telling you about. It's not a critique, but it's the situation, reality. So Herman was telling me a story of this beautiful exhibition by Harald Zeman, When the Attitude Becomes Forms. The curator was inviting some of the very emerging, interesting artists from all over the world. And at that point, Harald Zeman visited Daniel Buren in '67, so I was 2 years old. And so I love the idea of counting stories, but it's very interesting to answer to your questions. So Herman was asked by Daniel, because he was supposed to be part of the exhibition, but at the last minute, Harald Zeman decided not to invite Buren. Buren was so angry about this position, because when the attitude becomes forms, he wanted to create his own attitude. So he wanted to do a performance in Bern, in Switzerland. So he asked Herman to produce his event. And it was not the kind of production that we have now, gallerist. It was only to pay the train ticket from Paris to Bern and to print the poster that Buren sticked in all over the city. So the very interesting thing is to show what was the kind of involvement of a collector at that time, because there were very few of them. They were not like now. Now we have many collectors, but it's a kind of société du spectacle. It's not like this beautiful story that Samia was telling us.
Oh, Herman Daled.
Herman Daled was someone like...
very inspiring,
inspiring, and he was creating a kind of poetry. And now we know that all his kind of collection is part of the Museo or MoMA, So he was really linked to the artist to try to be a bridge between the drawing, the inspired project, to the reality.
And today, I suppose maybe this is one for Aaron because of your new initiatives, and you mentioned your residencies for collectors. Today, it's still quite a new idea, isn't it, to get involved in this way? What is it why set up these residencies now? And what are you hoping to teach collectors? What do they need to know before they can become more like Samia's collector?
So Delfina's been around for 30 years. I've been director for the last 10. Over that period of time, let's say when I first started my role there, we worked a lot with artists primarily. And what we immediately began to recognize, they were going back to some art scenes and not getting support back at home. So we first started supporting curators, and often curators the opportunities to come to London, undertake a residency, to then support their artists back at home. Next, we had writers. So for us, it was a natural evolution to begin working with collectors if your role is to support the whole ecosystem of the art world. But I also want to return to what I said earlier in terms of the distance that sometimes and in some places have been created between artists and collectors, whereby a conversation that's unmediated, a conversation that's about art doesn't take place, largely because collectors will go visit an artist in their studio as a group of 20 people brought in by an institution. Exactly, they don't stay for 20 minutes and they all leave. And so there's no real kind of engagement taking place. So first and foremost, the purpose of setting up the residencies for collectors was to create a space where artists and collectors could cohabitate. So the collectors are actually living in the same property with the artists. They're sharing the kitchen, they're sharing the bathrooms.
How many collectors
So
are on the residency?
what we decided to do was to host one at a time alongside 6 to 7 artists.
Yes.
Okay, good.
But as it's worked out, like last week, for example, we had 2 collectors in residence alongside 4 artists. The collectors come for 1 to 2 weeks at a time, because of course they are busy people. They have to make money to buy art. But also they have families and other engagements. So we thought that that's 1 to 2 week period of time, we would make it as intense and pack it as much as a 3-month residency for an artist will be. So during that period of time, they are meeting other collectors. They're meeting art spaces in London. They're getting feedback about their practice as a collector. Now, what does it mean when you say a collector has a practice? We're very much looking at those who are challenging the notion of what a collection is. So our very first visits by collectors were by the John Salons from Marseille, which many of you will know, who of course are collecting conceptual art and performance.
Yes.
All the way to Lucian from China, who arguably has a collection of architecture in Nanjing, commissioning 25 buildings by the world's leading architects. Wow. So we are looking at collectors who are out there who actually are trailblazers in terms of thinking about the possibilities for what a collection can be. So the residencies is looking at the context in which they're working in and what they're attempting to do as collectors. So I'll give you one quick example. Last week we had a visit by Luba Mikhailova, who's a Ukrainian collector who set up her first art space in Donetsk, which is a city that's now completely occupied by Russia during the last war. During that occupation, she lost the art space that she set up in her entire collection. So she's reevaluating her role right now in terms of where she goes next as a collector and how she can further support the arts. So her residency was visiting experimental grassroots spaces. It was visiting private initiatives like Parasol Unit in London. And it was like looking at models that she could take back to Ukraine and set up new initiatives and make a much bigger impact there. So therefore, we're looking at the social value of of collecting and the role of the collector, not necessarily the economic value within it. So for us, it's really been about fostering these relationships between artists and collectors, but also supporting collectors to think about the next stage of their career, just like we do with the artists. Yeah. There's no kind of difference between that. And because they are sharing the kitchen and the bathrooms and whatnot, it's a very natural relationship that comes out of it. And that's what we hope to foster more of, but also present those collectors as an example to those who are trying to find their way in the art world, which is a dark, dirty, but very lovely place too, but it can be quite challenging to work out where to place your efforts, where to place your energy. and because there's so many different options. So the residency is partly about helping kind of collectors do that, just like we help artists navigate the art world.
And I love the idea that maybe collectors are thinking that there are other ways I can do this, and I just need, and actually, Aldo, I'm going to put up some pictures of MACBA, but that sort of brings me to asking you what made you go from being an art buyer to being a collector to funding a museum?
What the problem?
Here are some pictures of MACBA.
I think the most important for me was always my passion for the art. I was quite before involved in education. I wanted to have a school for kids, and I was in 2 or 3 projects. And then when I started collecting more often and building a more
higher levels,
high-level collect pieces, and the number of the pieces that should be a problem. It's the problem of all the collectors. You need a storage, so you don't enjoy what you buy.
We spent a lot of time last week, actually. Every time we do a visit to someone, our collector residents say, so where do you store your things?
Exactly.
But that's a problem.
Send them to Aldo.
That's a problem because the artists produce the pieces to be shown. And the collector is supposed to buy the piece because love the piece and to be seen every day. So I remember there was a time I keep some of the pieces below my bed because in my house at that time was full hanged, and some of the pieces, at that point I said, okay, I had to do something. So I started to find a place where to build the museum. And it's located in San Telmo. That is it's the older place in the Buenos Aires, where all the antiques spaces and some museums is close to the river. It's beautiful. The idea is because I always say, and it's in some way the goal of the museum, education through art. Because that's why the 80% of the budget goes to education in the museum. We receive more than 30,000 students a year, and even police students, the academy, to make them socialize more and start to think about the society also in the cultural way. Makes them soft, not too hard. And I think I'm happy because what I'm trying to do with education, I found it through the art, and I achieved the goal to be in education, but keep my passion for the art.
And do you also do you have patron committees? Do you also educate at that level? Do you have a museum group, people who you encourage either to loan or to help continue to foster art?
Yeah, I've been talking with a couple of people that are attending here, and the problem of the sponsors and the problem of the donors is the same in many countries where there is not a good law about mecenazgo. And I think in France and as well in Argentina we have the same situation. And it's different. I live in New York since 7 years from now, and they have a law. The people make donation and they use that to deduct from the taxes. That fall. So
you also have this in France.
You have the same if you have a private.
It's not
museum.
Overused, but it exists. You can have a tax deduction if you give to a museum 60%. I think you can.
But in United States, as you know, the donations are huge.
But
now I created last year a Fundación MACBA in United States. Was approved to receive donation and be deducted.
Yeah.
But we are waiting in Argentina to have a similar taxes advantage as they have in Brazil. So it's very difficult to get donors, really. We have an advisory board, really important, with former directors and actual directors in many museums, in order to spread the voice and get projects with the financing already made. But it's not easy, and we are working now to increase the size of the Association d'Amitié. But it's always a problem. And you can see Peter Halley, very important piece from the 80s. And that was a really a project that I enjoyed a lot. It took me 3 years to create the project. It was Geometric Obsession. It talks about the 50 years of the geometry in the United States, 1965-2015, and covers all the schools that were important in the United States, the schools of color in Washington, New York, the Op-Art, California School, Anonima Group, almost 100 artists, and it was curated by 3 important curators in the United States, Robert Morgan, Donald Cuspit, and Stephen Woswell. And this exhibition, I get the support from the US government, because it was the major exhibition about geometry since the 70s. And now the exhibition is going to travel for 2 or 3 museums in the United States.
I would think it's quite unusual for the US government to be supporting museums, so that's great. And then just to go back a bit to the private collectors, and let's say Samia's collector is the perfect collector. There must sometimes be conflicts when a collector says, I will fund this project at the beginning, but then they want it to go a certain way that maybe the artist doesn't want it to go. Have any of you come across problems at all?
This happened once, and we withdraw.
Okay.
Immediately.
Yeah.
We said you can't tell the artist what he should do or whatever.
But it's tricky if artists need money. I think this is the tricky area. Yes, please.
I mean, I have a good example. I mean, we also have a group of patrons for Delfina Foundation, and of course, sometimes the residencies don't result in anything immediately.
Yeah.
Something will come over time, but immediately, and we do not put that requirement onto the artist.
Yeah.
We also have residencies where very specifically collector will support. Okay, very similar to how the example you described, there was a commission. This was just an open-ended residency, and we approached the collector. He said, you could apply to my foundation. We applied to his foundation, and we were working with the foundation director. They said, congratulations, you received the grant. It was for £3,500, which is not very much money, because it was a very short residency. The condition is the artist must give a work to the foundation to receive the money. And normally that wouldn't be a problem if it was a lot more money, perhaps, but it was £3,500, which was less than the cost of his work.
Yes.
And so then we're in a situation where this artist is from Africa, in a context where there's not much possibilities for him to raise the resources for the residency.
3,500 today.
Yeah. But, we basically told the collector to fuck off. We're like, we're not going to put the artist in that kind of position. Go and buy a work from the artist.
Sure,
and then if they want
likes
it, we
work,
can work it out separately.
Yeah.
And so these things do kind of come up, I think, in the context of funding for institutions when you're working directly with collectors in a way in which we do. Our patrons group are amazing because it's a pool of funding that we access. But when it's a direct relationship, it can be problematic.
And actually, that's a good question. It raises the question: what's going to happen at the end of this Demester work?
So,
does the collector does he own all the pieces? Does he have the first
he has
right
the first
of refusal?
choice. He might take 1, 2 works. I don't know. He waits and see, but of course he will have the first choice. Fair enough. Yeah.
But he's not invested in the other works. He doesn't get a cut back. He's not expecting money back.
He helped with the scientific side in Berlin. It was very helpful, and he gave money, and that's it. And then he will get a work that he can choose.
And then what about the other conflict? Kamel, I'm going to ask you this, but the other possible conflict that you could have, that if you introduce a collector to your artist and they're very involved in their career, then they then have a direct relationship, which as a gallerist could be a problem. Is that something you manage, you look at carefully?
Oh, it never happened. I mean, of course, artists, they can even meet collectors in cafes, restaurants. So it's not a question because you link the collector to the artist that they can behave in asking them directly or trying to direct them. This, I would say, I'm not naive, but it doesn't happen.
Okay.
People, they have respect, I would say, I think. This can happen, but we withdraw. We say, sorry, we can have a coffee together, that's it. I would say that some of the collectors are very happy to be part of a challenge in terms of creating an utopia, creating something which can happen. And I would say my position is to offer them the opportunity to be the first choice. They can say yes or no. And maybe the collector of Samia can say, "Oh, yeah, I would keep this money for another thing." Yes. I would say, maybe. We never know what happened.
I mean, in this case, he had to commit, but he could also say, "I don't like the work."
Yes.
That's
and
for
also,
sure.
as we were talking about earlier, some works are not particularly ownable. You know, some of these works are going to disappear after. It could be a performance or something that disintegrates naturally. So persuading people. But do you emphasize the social, the kind of generous? You are, you know, the artist as a charity. Is that how do you sell the idea of supporting?
I mean, in a special case, if an artist has a specific project and needs some support, we will think carefully who would be the ideal person who is generous enough, open enough, willing to go for it. But of course, it's tricky. You can't ask any kind of buyer to come along.
Because, of course, presumably there is still value in there being buyers.
Yes.
You know, when as you were saying before, sometimes that's better than offering something very. Yeah. What about for? I mean, I don't know. It would be lovely to hear exactly what sort of levels we're talking about financially. But if younger people, I get a sense that younger people today don't necessarily want to own as much, and we're in much more of a sharing community. But can they afford also to be a part of this? I mean, would you do Kickstarter campaigns, or are there ways to engage younger people at lower levels?
Absolutely. We've actually done a Kickstarter campaign previously with Art Basel, and it's a very interesting story because that Kickstarter campaign there's a direct line between that campaign and our collector in residency program. Only via the fact that we were very lucky to be part of the very first group of organizations invited by Art Basel to the Kickstarter campaign. And Kickstarter is very much about harnessing the community that's around you, and that maybe has wanted to support you but hasn't found the right way to, or the right level. So of course the Kickstarter can give anything from £1 to how many ever you'd like to give. With our particular campaign, it was a way to ask people for small amounts of money who we weren't able to access previously. Anyway, I'll fast forward through this. It was a hugely successful campaign, and yes, it is a great medium to get young collectors involved. We had a dinner for Art Basel in London as a result of this campaign, and we invited the collector Alain Servais to join us for the dinner. And because we were quite close in terms of kind of friendship, I said to him, well, we have an extra bedroom at Delfina if you'd like to stay, you know, it was just one night. And he said, yeah, actually, I'll come, but I'll stay for 3 nights. And then I watched his engagement with the artist over that 3-day period, you know, sitting up late at night, having a glass of wine, you know, well, he doesn't drink, but the artists were drinking. And they were kind of debating kind of art market politics. And then he was also kind of giving them a sense of actually a value for works that are like performance, for example, which, you know, we had a group of performance artists in residence then at the time, who of course felt outside of the art market in a way. And he was giving them a sense of what galleries that they could actually work with or try to become closer to, who would have an affinity towards their kind of practice. And so the kind of exchange that took place then made us think about this could actually work as a residency for collectors alongside artists. And then now outside of that, our own kind of patrons group, we can accept anything, to be honest with you. Like, we don't have levels in that regard because we think that everyone should be able to kind of participate in the context of the residency. I think the problem is with maybe young collectors is that if they're not comfortable having a conversation relationship with artists, then they may not be so comfortable being a patron at Delfina Foundation. Yeah. Because it is about that social kind of dynamic. Yes. Largely, we've had really great experiences, I have to say. But it's also been a sophisticated kind of collector who has been a patron of many different museum acquisition groups. Then what happens is they realize that maybe they're not really engaging with artists as much as they'd like to. So therefore, they then want to get engaged with Delfina Foundation because they know there are real artists there living and working in the space. So I think as institutions, we have to create these opportunities for young collectors to get involved. And I think galleries are doing a great job at that as well. By hosting kind of events around exhibitions that attract them into it.
And it is clearly a very different mindset to want to sit up at night watching an artist drink wine and discuss the world around you from buying at auction pretty anonymously. And
being able to show it off to your friends, or you can't necessarily show off an artist.
Yes, or a Kickstarter donation, it's not as... Okay, this brings me, so before I open it up to questions, that brings me very nicely to my last question. We saw last night in New York that a collector who wants to show off a work has spent $110.5 million on a Basquiat. But is that good for art? Is that directly opposed to what you're trying to do at a grassroots level? How does that affect art, do you think?
I think it doesn't have much to do with art. I think it has to do more with speculation, showing off, especially when you know that the collector posts immediately the picture on Instagram.
He put his picture on social media, yes.
Serious collectors are more discreet in general. And those huge numbers are very confusing for other artists. It creates a very bad feeling, atmosphere. It doesn't mean anything because then you measure if this one is 100 million and this other one is 500,000. What does it mean? I mean, art history and art market are two different things.
How did you agree? I can sense
no,
it. Yeah,
I don't
I'm
agree.
interested to hear.
It's part of the game. It's part of the world. It's not the 60s. It's not the 50s. We are in 2020 almost. Globalization. The world is flooding in money, flooding directly. Since I think one of the key points or turning points, to say in a better English, was the last financial crisis in the United States in 2010. I remember to be in London in February 2010, maybe Kamel that follows the market for sure, he remember. There was, I think, the most important auction about Zero Group. There was an auction of the Zero Group. Oh, yes. It was superb, never seen, and you're not gonna see again that kind of collection because it was amazing. And was at the same time of the crisis. The estimates went to the real price, hammer price, average 10 times. And from then, never the prices of the Zero Group went back.
So it established a new level.
Yes, and that's
for lesser known artists.
And that's the market. And
but that shows you that when the stock market sometimes is low, the art market can go up because people trust more gold or art than stocks.
I want to finish the idea. I finish the idea. So usually when the market goes bad, financial market, in the previous time, if you see in the 70s, on the 80s, the art market also was bad.
Yes, recently, yes.
But now it's totally inverse. So when the financial market goes down, the art market goes well.
You're opening up a whole other debate.
Most people are scared of the financial market, more money goes to art. But besides that, again, the world is floating in money because the rates are really, really low, where in Germany it's -0, in United States it's almost 2% for 30 years or 10 years. So there is a lot of speculation, but how many more millions of works, paintings, sculptures are right now than in the 70s? People that are the storage in the world, even free ports, there are trillions of storage more than in the 70s. And as many more foundations to make the seed capital for emerging artists and other collectors to found other projects, the production of the artists now is immense. So it's impossible to try or to manage that in a different way, and it's the rules. But in some way, even as a speculation, the speculation is going to hurt mostly the people that speculate. It's the big money, the major leagues. But in some way, that fashion part of the art world make the collectors, above all the young collectors, more interested to be part of the game in different levels, and attracts also the idea that it's easier to get money to in some way to fundraise a project, because they say maybe in 10 years it's going to become another Basquiat. So it's not bad. It's not good. If you analyze, some of the prices are really extremely crazy. I think many of those are not going to be stand in the long term. But now, and you study that and you wrote an article or a book, art is an asset class.
I had a question mark there.
Yeah, no, but it's true. No, for me, I'm a banker also,
levels,
and it's an asset class.
Well, I think, and maybe better to buy Basquiat than a yacht. Maybe there is a trickle down effect. I should probably open it up to questions now. I didn't know if anyone had any questions to this brilliant. Oh, I already have a question. Oh, you need my microphone. Thank you.
So, because today we are talking so much about collectors and collecting, is there a way? What is the? I mean, when do you call somebody a collector and when is somebody a buyer? Because I'm a little bit confused. Everybody's speaking about collectors, and when you read the reports from TIFAF and stuff, then there's rumors that there should be 600,000 collectors. But what actually is a collector? I mean, normally for me a collection is something when it's a structured, you know, like your geometric obsession exhibition is a structured thing. But do you think that there are 600,000 people or even more that really collect structurally? And I maybe ask you.
Well, I suppose I would. Is there anyone who wants to say how you would define? Do you define a difference between a buyer and a collector, or is that up to the individual?
Totally about the individual, and the world is huge, and there are people in love with art all over the world. Of course, I personally make a difference between collector and speculators, or between people who love art and people who just like the art world. That's it.
I think everyone's a collector. I mean, that's the kind of point that we took with the program we're doing called Collecting as Practice, where we're looking at the psychology, philosophy, and the politics of collecting. And we're trying to make the program as accessible to all, so that the idea of collecting rocks on a beach, shoes, stamps, all part of kind of the notion of what collecting is. When you take that same terminology and place it in the art world, again, it does become about the dealers, the buyers, the collectors, the speculators, and all this kind of complicated stuff. But I do like to think of it in this global sense that we are all kind of collectors. Just that when you go to like a fair dinner, or you're like registering for accreditation for something, and you only have the category curator, collector, dealer, and you have to make a choice within that.
Again, going to the point. I live in New York and I work in New York. I receive, I think, every month at least 2 or 3 proposals to make art funds, all the time. Make an art fund. You know that there is hedge funds, equity funds. Now there are art funds. The largest one that exists is in London, in fact, and for sure you know that one. So how much money? Usually are funds of $50 million to $100 million to start, and are really petite, small, because it's not real money. So it's impossible to stop the speculation, because there is something that differentiate the art world to the financial market. It's not regulated at all. And there are, as you know, there are many articles all the time about laundering money with art, free port storage with pieces of art that storage there, bought with laundry money. So, and that's is part of the bubble we see many times in the prices of the contemporary art. When it's gonna stabilize, or stop a little the bubble, when that market starts to be regulated. Because what happens in the 2010, 2011, since many banks fail and the system in the United States was really destroyed, and the floating of money around the world is immense, the banks lost a lot of assets that went to the art market, and now they are making a new business. They lost the chance to have the money in certificate of deposit. Now they have the money is invested in art, but how they can recover the business? They are making a lot of business doing loans against the collateral of art. So the collectors, even for a speculation, many of them buy the art, put the art in the storage, even the houses or palace or whatever. The banks goes, but the bigger player is the Bank of America. It's the biggest player because they have the money, they have the balance, as we said, to lend money with art as collateral. But this is again the game that destroyed the financial market in the 2010, because you have, suppose, 100 millions in art. Bank of America comes to you and say, okay, you have 50 millions with that collateral. With that 50 million, you can go and buy again 50 millions in art. You call Bank of America, and Bank of America gave you 30 millions. It never ends. When is going to end that? When that market starts to be regulated, or when there's a correction in the market, as in the art market, as happened in the financial market, and when the prices start to correct, falling down, and those people that has the collateral supporting the loans has to sell, push it to cover the loans, the prices are going to be like in a snowball going down. It's going to happen? Could happen, yes. Yes, could happen.
Thank you. Or maybe the lenders aren't collectors. That's a long answer to your question, but that's a very interesting point. Were there any other questions? Oh, Georgina. Oh, and there's Georgina, and there's one at the back. Yes.
Just the same question that we had in the previous panel is the future, particularly, are there plans for Delfina to what happens? Sandra told us, you weren't there, but Sandra was asked the same question. And she said, I don't know if my children will want to continue.
Well, in the case, we weren't set up as a family foundation, sort of, first of all. So Delfina never wanted to lumber her kids with kind of the burden of the institution. But it is an institution. It is set up independently from the family, from her, although she sits on a board, and so does one of her sons. So over the next kind of few years, what we're looking to do is expand the board and create a fully autonomous organization. And we have a lot of really fantastic patrons and collectors who are already involved in the organization. So, and some of them are the next generation. And so they will be the ones taking us into kind of the future. If I could take that question a different way too, about the future of collecting, because also in the previous panel, there was some reference to the whole notion of, collecting kind of the digital, collecting performance, and collecting these other areas. And I think that as technology and as we widen the scope of what is collectible, which is some of the things we're looking at in our program, I think that we will begin to kind of create another kind of way of valuing kind of these things. Yes, a website at the moment, and I know Alonso Vase, the previous collector mentioned, did show me once, is the website I bought, and it's an artwork, and it's online, anyone can access it, it's free. That has, I think we have to think about value in a very different way. Fortunately, there is the market that dominates, but I think social value of art and the narrative it creates for us as a society is absolutely kind of important. That Basquiat, yes, that is the economic value of that work. If it's conserved well, it will kind of stand the test of time. But what we will remember about that artwork will be the price tag of it, unfortunately. So I'm not sure what that is actually adding to our society, or maybe it's a real reflection of where we really stand today. Yes. A sad one, but there you go.
thank you. And then there was a question, yes, back there.
Hello. Some of you mentioned the fact that more and more collectors aim to be part of the creative process. Do you think that this means that in the future we could have more and more partnerships between collectors and gallerists in the future?
Go on, Kamel.
To foster creation.
I'm going to make you talk.
Collectors are always invited to, I would say there's different profiles of collectors. Of course, some of the collectors, because of one point, they like the artist, the second point, because they want to have a first choice, third point, they like the institution. Of course, collectors, there's much more people getting in this territory. It's, there was this kind of guy who was presenting himself as with a trophy, with the Basquiat. For me, it was a little bit weird, but it happened. The spectrum of collectors is so large now. We have small collectors, middle collectors, huge collector like this guy. So it's a kind of exhibitionist collector, this guy. It's he wanted to show, it was an incredible way of communication. Maybe some of the people would say that because he did a worldwide communication. Would say everyone speaks about that. It's very, I received this Instagram, I had to open my eyes. The guy in front of the Basquiat, and extremely proud, as if he was showing, as if he was a hunter getting to Africa with a lion, or someone taking a new sexy girl. Very strange. So it's different profiles of collectors. It's, as you said, the reflection of our society. We are in a very new world, so even if you are a little bit sometimes sad, it's part of, we are witness of our society.
Can I just follow up on that? Are there also collectors who are investing in galleries? I mean, is that one way of supporting a program? That seems to be happening more?
I don't know if it is existing in France, but maybe,
yeah.
but...
I know there are a couple. Sorry.
Maybe, yeah, in England, yeah.
Yeah, there are a couple. And
in America.
US, yeah.
But I don't think that in France it exists, no?
I don't know any, or not even in Germany also, no.
No, I don't think so.
The examples that I know, I won't name them, but the examples I know are of often collectors who are very, very close with the gallerists,
yes,
and actually already didn't really want to
support.
see the gallerists, because some galleries are basically like non-profits like us. By the time you start commissioning artworks and
but you
selling
mean
it.
they are sleeping partners or they are supporting
partners?
Supporting, yeah.
Maybe they sleep too. I don't know, but
Yeah.
No, but they are the ones who follow the program very closely and support actively in this way.
Yeah.
But backers, I have no idea. Maybe they are.
But would it be better for you to have someone actually buy your artists rather than support the gallery?
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Were there any other questions? You can have another one, and then I've got another one.
No, because you said this about tangible and intangible art, right? And so the other thing when we are speaking about a Basquiat, we speak about a painting. But you have, from Max Hetzler, you've showed us an artwork was with scientific background. So I can assume that artworks, when the market proliferates and gets more and more professionalized, become more expensive, like blockbuster movies, which cost hundreds of millions. So when the artworks will be produced more professionally, it might be that they become very expensive in doing, right, in producing. This will be maybe too much a burden for a normal gallery or for a collector. So don't you see that there might be a pooling of, or some kind of idea of producing or production of artworks, which will then be proliferated in a different way? Can't you somehow imagine that?
Well, I think there was, here in France, there was a gallery. Didn't Yvon Lambert put together a production company to help? This is going back maybe 5-10 years ago, to fund. Oh, was it Perrotin? Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, that's right. And I don't think it has
But did it work?
come off the ground. So maybe I'm thinking of a different one. But there is also. But yes, I think that is quite. This maybe the reason we're talking about this is because of the cost of production and how do you see that going?
What can happen is for one artist who works with 4 galleries, the 4 galleries together can produce the new body of work.
Yes, so that's the advantage of artists having lots of galleries. Yes, but is it also one reason why some artists are going to bigger galleries or more international galleries because they have the money to fund? So maybe in a way it's better to have your collectors fund than Larry Gagosian, for example.
Sure. No, so some artists have very expensive work to produce and would choose a gallery who would back every production. It happens.
I just want to talk about the non-commercial aspects of kind of commissioning as well, and also kind of throw up an interesting model of collectors coming together to support commissions, which is an organization in Istanbul. I was going to say actually called Saha, because I want to give something that was like not of like a British example. And Saha is a group of I think 50 or 60 collectors who've come together, and they each pay a membership fee, and collectively this has supported the commissioning of artworks in major institutions and biennales around the world. And they, of course, are not acquiring those works as an institution, they're just supporting the commissioning process of it, but also supporting residency. So they also support a residency, and sometimes 2 residencies a year at Delfina Foundation in London, but also around the world. So there are kind of other examples that can happen within outside of the kind of commercial context, because also let's not forget biennales and museums also kind of need support for commissioning as well. But I also think it's just to calm down everyone and just start making all these works do not need to be monumental. There's a time and place for that. And actually it's about whether it makes sense for that artist within their practice for it to be of that kind of scale. And that's where kind of good galleries give them that kind of advice.
Yeah, but also, we should mention Art Angel because it's quite spectacular what they do in London, A group of people who pay a fee a year and they produce amazing work by great artists since a long time with curator like John, what's his name?
Gerard?
No. The head of Art Angel.
Oh, yeah. Yes,
exactly, James Lingwood.
Yes. But they also, what then happens afterwards? I think it's all very well to produce, and I suppose if it's a film, it's probably okay. But if you do produce a monumental work that then needs someone to keep looking after it,
sure,
that's another area. I can see that there's room for something in between. Yes.
No, it's true. In general, the huge installation or the huge projects are made by museums or private collectors, important ones. So you're always going to have money in that case to fund this kind of project. But it's important at that point, going back to the project of your artist, and you ask what happened with the work, and they exchange the seed capital for the work. The rules have to be really clear at the beginning in order not to have any conflict after. Usually the museum or the collector is going to have the first choice, and sometimes they even agree the price before to finish the piece. It's important at that point.
Yes, that's a good point. Do you have a contract? Do you set up a contract? No, because this is the art world.
I know.
No. Yes, in the museum, yes, you have to.
But there's another point, about
Wait,
talking.
why don't you have any contracts?
Because we work with people we trust, and the moment there's no more trust, maybe we can part.
I know. I'm going to ask you a question. At the first kind of question that our collector in residence kind of told to, or the first story, I guess our collector in residence told to our artists about a situation kind of like this, and the gallery said, "Oh, we don't have contracts with the artists," and he said to the gallery, "Are you married?" Because that's the ultimate contract there. And if you have a contract with your wife or husband or same-sex partner, and you should also have one with the artists. I think it should be absolutely clear in terms of things being outlined in paperwork and guidelines, because there's so many conflicts of interest in the art world, and to have these things worked out and worked through and be transparent are absolutely important. So we're always advising kind of artists about do not do a deal if you do not have something on paper. kind of with the
Do you do
gallery.
contracts with your artists?
No, we never do contract
Shame
with
on you.
artists. No, but that's right. My lawyer, who is a lawyer for music business, she's saying me that it's insane that in our world
the
there's no
art world.
contract.
You see, the
But I would say we
unregulated
sign-
system allows this to happen. These galleries
Yeah.
take advantage of artists.
Yeah, but we sign contracts when we, as you know,
A huge
now
commission, of course, yeah.
when we work with an institution, as the private is substituting to the institution, there's less budget in institution. We have contract with the museum or the foundation because of sending back the money if the work is sold to the institution. In this case, yes, but with artists, no. It's shaking hands and glass of wine.
I run a non-profit art space. We raise money. It's residencies. We do not have artworks in exchange, but I have a contract with every artist about what we supply as a non-profit organization. We have a lease. They also sign a lease for the rooms, and they sign guidelines for use of the property, and we sign what they're going to do during the residency. We also say what we're going to provide during the residency, and that's not a business
but
kind of
for
organization.
galleries, I really think a lot about this subject, which is a very important subject. But I was really thinking, because I came from this world, signing a contract. But, it's not the same that when you bring someone in a residency and sharing bathrooms and kitchen, of course you need to have, in terms of insurance, everything. But with an artist, I was thinking about all the big dealers like Matisse or Canveler. They had contract and they were giving a monthly payment with artists. Now, even when you buy an artwork to an artist, sometimes he say you yes or no. It's a different world. It's not that as before they were paying, I would say, 1,000 or 100 per month for an artist, and they will have back.
They were buying work
Yes,
and paying
they were
by
buying.
installment.
Now we are producing, so it's very different. It's not
But
to,
if you're,
it's not to defend
if
our.
we're talking about a collector coming in with an artist, and there is a lot of room for abuse, I think, possibly on both sides. The artist may not produce what the collector wants. The collector may change his mind. That there must be advantages.
It can be written. That's right.
Fostering.
It
We can foster creation with a legal document. Are there any other questions? No, well, thank you all very much for listening. Thank you so much, Kamel, Samia, Aaron, Aldo. I think we should all leave with Aaron's notion that everyone is a collector. I think that's fantastic. Thank you very much.
We'll have a small break, and we see you in 15 minutes.